Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, whether you're in the world, it is your Lore Saviour, and we're just going to get straight into it because there's a lot to cover here. Or at least, it's going to feel like there was a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, there wasn't really that much. But the entire session was spent at the Natural History Museum in Chicago, or whatever the proper title of that is, like the Field Natural History Museum. I don't know, I don't give a shit anymore. That's in the past, like I don't care. But the entire session took place in this museum as the coterie plus the addition of the Brujah Sire went on a rescue mission for the Malkavian Sire, who'd, if you may remember from the last recap session, has gotten herself involved with a bit of hocus pocus shit. And this also came about following the Malkavian player realising that their blood bond with their sire had snapped, which usually does not bode well in such a circumstance. So it had the Malkavian and the Sombra player arrive at the museum first, doing a bit of investigation stuff outside. They found there was like a big old side door that where I'd imagine they'd bring like artifacts and whatnot in and out of the thing. There's like a couple of security cameras about and they didn't know what to do. Brujah player and their sire then arrived in Brujah player's van, and there's a bit of a conversation, everybody introducing each other and so on and so forth. I have to say it was a little weird for this because technically speaking this was a GMPC in the sense, as the sire was hanging around quite a bit and like making suggestions here there, so I had to make like a conscious reminder to like step back and make sure the players are doing stuff. There was that suggestion at the middle of the session, like all of you like working together sort of thing, but I'm not entirely too sure how well that stuck, but we'll see, because the players are still trying to like form and establish the meaning of their coterie, so just prodding, poking ideas and so forth. But it was the Brujah Sire who was able to work out how to deal with the camera. I just had them like pick up a rock, throw it at the camera, it spun the camera one way, probably broke it, and then they just slid the door open. Because the players, as mine often do, were overthinking things, which I'm not surprised, because as I've mentioned many times before, we are all autistic, and those who are on some degree of the autistic spectrum are known for overthinking pretty much everything. I do it too, so that's always a lot of fun. And sometimes as a GM, you just kind of need to give them like the really simple solution somehow, like move the fucking camera out of the way, or just not give a shit. Because it turned out it didn't actually matter. Because when they entered, I made the players do a frenzy check because there was like torn up bodies and like slash throats, as I described in a spoiler section of the previous campaign diary, and this only affected the Brujah and the Malkavian player because their hunger was particularly high, referring to notes once more. They then like turn into like a sort of security room sort of thing, and they found there was somebody who was like screaming, like swatting away bees that only they could see. Whilst the players were unable to determine that, or the characters, I should say, were unable to determine that, it was decided that everybody knew that this was a particularly potent use of dementation. And it's kind of disappointing, really, that the players didn't get like enough successes to warn what was going on, because I had quite a bit of a description planned for that. But who knows? Maybe the opportunity will present itself again. And knowing my players and their, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, infatuation with the Malkavian Sire, it all happened again, I am sure. So they then realised that all the cameras had been turned off. So the Brujah Sire's actions were kind of redundant, but of course they weren't to know that. Neither was the Sire, so they have to tread with caution. If you're hearing any snoring, that is my dog Holly, who snores like a pig, and as she comes closer, they may get louder, and we have a wooden floor, so the dog may walk about and you may hear the tipper-tapper, so apologies in advance if that's the sort of thing that bothers you. But anywho, they then pushed on and I made the two players, Brujah and Malkavian, perform a similar frenzy check, because there was more blood and whatnot, and it was creating quite the scene. Now, Malkavian player frenzied here, and I just had them like lap up the blood like a kitten. And this is where things became a little interesting, both good and bad. I will say mostly bad, and I kind of regret this happening. Because there was a lot of focus during and afterwards of how embarrassed the Malkavian player would be and then afterwards about this. And because of that, I, as the storyteller, warranted that the Malkavian player should take a point of aggravated willpower damage, which was the first for this chronicle, and indeed the previous one, the Sacrifice. And what that does in 5th edition, it removes a point of willpower permanently, and there's like a couple ways you can get them back. It's either by achieving an ambition, or at the end of the chronicle. And given the Malkavian player's ambition is to live a normal life, that's a little nebulous, and that's not going to be coming back anytime soon. Now, admittedly, when I did this, I had slightly misremembered this ruling. I don't remember what I thought it was, but in any case, we're going to work together, Malkavian player and I, to try and see if we can get that back somehow. I have a couple of ideas in mind. I feel that the Malkavian, I mean, being willpower, you can probably get that back by like really pushing yourself and like forcing your will through some dangerous sort of situation. At least that's my sort of thinking anyway, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on them in that situation. Malkavian player was, as I said before, was my partner, and they were kind of upset by that. I mean, it made sense in how they did that, and they weren't so much annoyed that I did it, but more so the fact that it happened, and also just how fucking garbage V5 is in that sense. Like, don't get me wrong, I like V5, but there's some, as with all game systems, there are some baffling design choices. But pushing onwards, I decided in my head there wasn't going to be any more frenzy checks of that nature, because that if that happened again, like, that's too aggravated, and, well, either with the same player or the Brujah player, so, and I think the point had been made there was blood and whatnot everywhere, and then they went into, like, a door, like, into the main foyer of the museum, like, the main hall, with this big old white, we've got, like, columns either side. There's a fucking huge diplodocus that like takes up like with the end of one hall, because the museum itself is fucking huge, and there are like 2 entries, like for that main floor, and then there's a ground floor which is technically underground, and then there's like a second floor. I had a look at the website and look at the various different maps, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. And there was also a really, I think it was interesting, a guy who filmed himself doing a whole tour of the place, which sort of helped me get like a general understanding and idea what the museum looked like. In 4K, no less. Not a deal breaker for me, but I just thought that was just a nice little detail. So that was very useful, so thank you. I do not remember who you are, but good on you. So they appeared in the museum. Evie's the name of the Brujah Sire, had to sort of bash the door down because there was like a dead body slumped to one end. Wasn't slashed open or anything, just like more damage, and the players are kind of like, God, what the fuck has happened here? And they kind of had a little look around, and they found that the box that had Nikolai in it, and I am mentioning this here because they actually have seen Nikolai now, which I'll get onto in a bit, but they've assumed it was going to be Dana, which is the Malkavian Sire's name, that was going to be in there. They saw the place on the tip, the box was all weathered and like it'd been underwater for some time, like signs that they had attempted to lift it open, but there wasn't anything inside, and there was like conversations here and there, emotional stuff, trying to work out the Sire's intentions sort of thing, the Sire working out the player's intentions and sort of things. At some point, this stuff with the Guru and the rune markings were talked about when they would find this the Sabbat were trying to find, which did arrive as they were downstairs in this like the ground floor bit. Everything was like very calm and peaceful. Well, as peaceful as one could have in such a situation. And then as they'd finished like searching, like people started to move in the floor above them, and that's when things got a little spicy. And so there was a bit of tension as like this Sabbat Splat, which I'll mention to the players now was Brujah, or Brujah, depending on your outlook on life. It was like ordering these other Sabbat about who were like scared shitless and they had these rifles. They all went off in different directions. Brujah player had the idea to use blink and to apprehend one, like put them in a grapple hold and then force them to drop their gun, which is very quick thinking. celerity joke aside, like, I wasn't entirely too sure how that was going to be handled, because one went off that way, one went that way, Splat went off another way, and then I had one of them come towards them. So Brujah play just went straight into action. Evie went over and like picked up the gun. They all like in turn went over there. They like dragged the individual back and they started questioning him, and they worked out that this individual basically didn't know nothing. He was like, as far as he was concerned, he was still human. He was just like beaten up, taken in the back of a truck, and then taken out there. And they were asked on collecting this spear for their employer, who wasn't Splat. Didn't say who and what it was, but if you've been paying attention to the spoiler sections, you know exactly who that is. And because they were interrogating him, and because, they were trying to assure him to some degree that things were okay, providing he cooperated, they worked out that this person was freshly embraced. I think the players, or at least most of them, knew the three that weren't Splat were Falsabat or Shuffleheads. But if they didn't, you do now. But they did know that there's somebody who was like superly freshly embraced, who didn't know his arse from his elbow, sort of thing. Evie claimed the rifle, was like pointing at the guy the whole time, and because of that, and they were like helping him out, and they were trying to calm him down and ensure things would be okay. I did think it makes sense that whilst they were looking for the spear, the guy like put forward the information. We were told not to touch it directly, and he showed that he was wearing gloves, which made the players feel a bit uneasy, because it's a why. Of course, the guy doesn't know why. And then they sort of like came about and decided they were going to go and look for this spear. And before I talk about like what would happen next, I have to admit now, as a storyteller, from this point onwards, I was really improvising all the way through. I mean, as I've said before, improvising as a storyteller / GM / whatever is kind of how I roll. But I do have like general ideas in my head, and you may remember from the spoiler section of the previous video that the thing I was going to have to do, if the players touched the spear with their hands, it was going to permanently remove a point of willpower. But because of the aggravated willpower damage before, I kind of felt that doing that twice would not only piss off the person who touched the spear, but the mystical, dangerous element of it had been lost because of the previous instance of the losing of the willpower, so to speak. So I had to come up with something else, and I had no idea what to do. And a lot was happening at this point, lots of conversations and ideas being thrown about, and like where to look, and I gave the players like maps and things so they could try and guess where to look. I said like the illustration was kind of like, stereotypical tribal Aztec sort of thing. I think that was the description that I gave anyway. So I didn't really have much time to quickly come up with a plan, and it was only when there was during a bit of conflict towards the end of the session that I had any real idea what to do with it. But regardless, they had a look at like I don't know what we'll call that. It was like an Americas, like the ancient Americas section or something like that. And I made them do a roll, to find it, and they all found it fairly quickly, but it was the Brujah player that found it first. And I also made a point saying that, well, Evie wasn't looking for the spear, she was looking to see if anybody was following them. And she found that Splat had found them. And I had the players perform like one action to try and get the spear out, and they all played in character, like, because they weren't aware that Splat was like there, and it was about to immediately launch into combat. They tried getting the spear out. And I have to say that I had hoped that would build a bit more of like, oh god, sort of like emotions, but that might have been me. I think that, I definitely think it was me not building up the tension enough. I don't think it kind of hit right, but that's fine, because it definitely did bother the players when it went into combat, where the 3 players managed to break the glass, and I can't remember who's fit. It was the Sombra's player who had managed to deliver the blow and like get their fist through the glass. As like one by one, the players like were all attempting to hit Splat. Malkavian player missed, like trying to use it. She crapped with a gun that was given to her by Evie, like as a last resort sort of thing. Missed. Brujah player did some damage, like there was a bit of glass they had as a weapon that they drove it into the Brujah anti-tribute in the eye, which is pretty graphic, of course, but you know, that's just kind of how I roll these things, and people just kind of loved that detail anyway. There was a bit of damage that's caused, but when it was the Brujah's turn, Splat, he just like gave him a fucking blow and just knocked the guy to the down. And there was a nice bit of an emotional bit there where when it was Evie's turn, she picked up her gun, because when Splat entered to the fray, he used Blink, grabbed her, and like threw her to the other side of the alleyway. And like she picked up her rifle and said, "Don't you fucking touch him!" and just started firing rounds at him. Unfortunately, she's not a great shot, but she did manage to deal some damage. But it would be Malkavian player who managed to grab hold of the spear, and they put like improvised their clothing, like held it that way around. If I was being spiteful, I would have said, "I'll perform a quick crafts check," but I wish I'd thought of that, actually. That would have been really fucking interesting. Alright, I've made a note for next time for something like that. But you know, they did that, and I made that you feel really ill and uncomfortable, which is something as a kindred you usually wouldn't feel, which did make them feel a bit concerned, thinking, shit, what happens if we touch this properly? Like, this is all very weird. And they stabbed the anti-tribute Brujah, Splat. Why do I keep forgetting his name? Given the fact it's the title of the fucking campaign diary. But yeah, they drove it through Splat. Like, it wasn't like they stabbed him a bit, it's like they drove it through him, and because she got a lot of successes. And it was at that point I had to come up with something to happen. And it was on that spur of the moment, like, he gets absorbed by the spear. Like, he gets absorbed into like the actual blade of the spear, and that was perfect, because everybody was like, what the fuck? That really fucking freaked everybody out. Like, what the fuck is this? Which was great. It's like, whew. So, hooray for improv. But that was pretty much the end of the combat, because then the other two shovelheads came, and as their reward, because I wasn't going to have Dana appear here originally, like, your princess was in another castle sort of situation. No, Dana had removed the previous, the remaining shovelheads, and it had like a very weird heart-to-heart between Malkavian and Sire. Weird because Malkavians and they're both covered in blood, they're both a mess, and there's still that affection there. Le Sombre player was able to like smash the spear, both the handle and like put a crack in the blade, and I described all these green nasty spirits like just swirling and screaming that just sort of disappeared into the ether, which of course is a very loose interpretation of here. Got distracted by a butterfly on the outside. Sorry. Autism and ADHD just sit on the same spectrum, and I'm easily distracted like that sometimes. But yeah, there was the heart-to-heart to the Malkavians, where all the players now know of what it was that Nikolai had requested, to remove his child, Disable, Abraham, Primogen, and the whole conspiracy thing that I had set up. And I did actually say in-game that there was now a blood bond in place, but that was me forgetting V5, the Tremere can no longer blood bond, which, when I remembered that, I felt really fucking annoyed about. But that does give me the opportunity to provide more spicy means of control. And I have a really simple one in place, which I'll talk about much later. All the while, the Brujahs and the Sombre, they went to check up on the Shovelhead, who I named Gabriel, who had like the talk of the birds and the bees, as it were. Understanding on the very base level that their life is ruined and they're now a vampire. There was a bit of a conversation, because the Sombre player had realised that the Brujah Sire, Evie, was like giving them funny looks on the mentioning of the La Sombre Sire, where it was kind of revealed a bit more. I agree, Holly. It was kind of revealed a bit more that La Sombre Sire, Khalida, and the meant-to-be Sire, the Brujah player, La Sombre, are like blood siblings, which I've mentioned a while ago, but that's officially confirmed now. The two Brujahs like parted ways briefly, because Brujah Sire wants to have a proper talk about why they disappeared. Everybody found out about what Dana was doing, and the torpored, or rather staked, Nikolai now in the back of a car. And the players got Damien to come and clean this mess up, and was accompanied by the Scourge and Hound Alexis Santos to clear this shit up. And then everybody just went back to their havens, and there was quite a lot of questions that needed to be answered. Like, what does that spear do? What is the Sabbat doing? Like, what is that spear? Like, what's Nikolai intending? So with the museum cleared up, Gabriel's run off somewhere. The Brujah side is like now waiting for the following night to have the conversation. We now move on to the spoiler section, where I talk a lot more about the players' goals, because I have quite a few notes back from them and how I'm going to interact from them, as well as like general plans going forward. So if you don't want any spoilers, and I know you're my players, you're not going to want any spoilers, respectfully, fuck off. And if anybody else doesn't want any spoilers for the next session, you could leave now. But before you do, check out the various links in the description below, which are various World of Darkness books that I use for these sessions, as well as homebrew of my own creation. And if you purchase any of the books through any of those links, I get some of the money back because I'm an affiliate, and it allows me to do the usual lore dives, book reviews, and all the other fun stuff that I am known to do. And with that out of the way, let's carry on with the spoiler section thing. So the thing that two of my players want to do, they're going to go and feed, because Malkavian players' hunger is at a very uncomfortable 4, and Brujah is at 3. We're going to start with a Malkavian player, which most of their plans, all of them is like giving me their plans in 3 parts, but really Malkavian players is 2.5, because most of it is feeding and trying to find out, you know, how they're going to gain their like contracts and work forever from Nikolai, who was the one that was giving them to her. Because in my mind, Nikolai is not going to have much more to do with Malkavian player or any of that stuff now, at least not in the sense that had previously been established. Because the stronghold he has is now over the Sire, not the player. And if you go against me, I will kill your Sire. Because now I know how much the two of you are into each other. I've got you wrapped around my fucking finger. Because Nikolai's a little shit. Like, several centuries old, he looks like a 9-year-old boy, and he's just a complete cunt. And that's why I love the character so much. And I also think it's like having like kid antagonists and protagonists and these sort of things are interesting, because it puts a very interesting spin and moral questions on everything. As a side note, I was watching a review for the Walking Dead Universe TTRPG, and one of the archetypes there is simply the kid. And I think it's interesting that that's like an introduced idea there, because they're different stories that you could tell with that sort of thing. And of course, Nikolai isn't a kid proper, as I've said, but you know, I just find it particularly interesting that characters like that do exist. That and being a very taboo thing. Dana was also going to be asked about by Malkavian player, I worded that weirdly, about the Midnight Circus, which I thought was a bit unusual because that was something that was brought up in the session proper. And Dana had no idea, but I have to see what happens during the session and, you know, and react what I believe is accordingly appropriate. So that's basically them and sorted out. Brujah player is going to scope out a gym and hunt, because they have the Scene Queen, where they feed on like sporty people, as to the Lore Saviour player, but they have like a different means of doing that, which I think is very interesting. Brujah player is going to go to the university and try to talk to Critias, because you remember that Anaxamitsi was there, which means the Sabbat know about this, or at least, well, to be honest, they know about Lennox, because the Lore Saviour has been stalking him and has been very aware about all of this has been going on. But, you know, informing Critias is actually a very sensible thing to be doing. And it's going to be Brujah, a player here, who's going to have the physical confrontation. It's going to be like the end of a university lecture sort of thing. And there's going to be like, I'm going to have it like people like stare him down, like make like and see how he deals with the physical confrontation. Like, is that Sabbat? Is it a ghoul? Is it that? Or is it just being a dickhead? I have to see how he communicates a lot of this out of character and explaining things, because depending on what he says, I may just have him being stalked by Sabbat. But I think this is going to be more like a traditional, like, university bully sort of thing. You know, just to put the character on edge and just see how they react. So they're going to go and talk to Critias about that stuff, and he also wants to have a little chat about Critias about his general role in vampire society, which kind of came out of nowhere to me. And following that was a little conversation where the players were reminded like how old Critias is, and he's like sort of like this go-to example for philosopher Brujah, which I thought was particularly interesting. And just the idea of like talking about what is it that a journalist Brujah can do, you know, within the Camarilla, which again is kind of vague, but it's interesting. And like the Malkavian, I'm going to try and facilitate that and see what happens. And you know, just have these really interesting roleplay sessions and sections, which I think is going to be really cool. And then they're going to talk to the La Sombra player about their shared trauma regarding crappy sires, I believe, and La Sombra stuff, because the La Sombras are stalking them, and see what La Sombra player knows. At least that's what I think is going to happen. But again, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Then we have the La Sombra player's plan. And this one's interesting. Well, they've all been interesting. I do not remember if I mentioned this, but La Sombra player wanted to go and visit... I have mentioned this. They wanted to go and visit a touchstone on Halloween because it's their birthday. It'll be like a special thing. Be more like watching from the shadows sort of thing. And there's going to be like a car watching the La Sombra player, like to put them on edge. So to go back a little bit, back to the Malkavian player. When they return to their haven after feeding, I'm going to have the Hakata there. Just for them to have that conversation about what to do with that ghost. Just introduce them as a seemingly friendly NPC, because that's going to be a lot of fun for me, as it will be for everybody else. But I've been wanting like to push forward this bit of the story for a while now. And if you think about it, the last few of these sessions, they've only been spread over 2 nights, I should say. So having the like days progress forward finally, it's rather exciting. So yeah, there's this birthday tradition as written down. The Sombra player wants to head to the Succubus Club and have a conversation with Portia to see what they could do with like thaumaturgical wards around the club, which is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's a sensible idea to protect your big-ass haven in such a manner from outside threats, but at the same time, this is Portia, and if you know about Portia, you know how dangerous this is going to be. And the simple favour that I'm going to have Portia request is that, okay, I'm going to give you my talents, you're going to give me yours, i.e. with a bit of oblivion. So we're going to have Helena that's going to learn some obtenebration, which is going to be fucking frightening, shall we say. And it will allow her to be a lot more fucking sneaky and shitty. But we'll see how that goes, you know, to see if that's a fair exchange or not. And then there's the third thing, well, 3.5. Try and find Gabriella, the Nosferatu hand, you know, the whole hacking and Horatio thing I've mentioned before. Talk about security for the Abyss, including Astaire and Lennox if they want to come along, brackets, optional. Astaire and Lennox are the names of the Malkavian and Brujah player. La Sombra player is Ridley. But just having too many names going about is just a bit confusing. So I'm just sticking to what I'm saying. So just reading from the notes here. So yeah, that's all going to be very interesting indeed. Just facilitating all those and like getting some of those story hooks on the move. Damien and Alexa also know about the werewolf stuff now. And the Sabbat presence. So I'm now having to move forward my Elysium very fucking quickly. So the following night, the players are going to wake up and they're going to be given letters. And I've made a crappy little cheesy, pinky ready sort of handout that's been made by entourages of Annabelle, the Toreador Primogem, where this is going to be like a masquerade, as it were. This is going to be the Elysium that's going to be talking about, you know, the stuff of the SI, now the Sabbat, and now the Guru. And I'm not quite too sure how to go about handling the Guru aspect of this. But we'll work it out. There's going to be various members of Kindred Society there for the players to talk to. I know La Sombra player wants to talk to Maximilian Dorman, the Ventry that was supposed to talk to them, and there hasn't been a chance to do that, so they're going to be there. Because there's stuff that I'm planning with Horatio's not going to be at this Elysium. Also, if you've read some of the older materials, Horatio and Annabelle don't exactly get along. Not many of the vampires do. But I do not think that Annabelle would invite Horatio to this particular event. This event being like a classical performance at some hall that I wrote down and I don't remember of. Because 5th edition Chicago by Night's not very good at giving you Elysium spots. Sure, you can come up with anyone that you want, but it's nice just to have like something there for players to be tossed at, so to speak. The 1st and 2nd edition Chicago by Night does, so I have no regrets getting those books at all. Yeah, so there's going to be people that me, Harry Milliner is also going to be at the Elysium. There's going to be a bit of a conversation where I'm sure the Malkavian player is going to go and have a little chat with them, and they're going to hear like this sort of business why they're there, or at least even the prince is not going to hear why the Hakata are moving in to Chicago, this personal business. And Kevin's not going to challenge it either because he's very much aware of the promise of 1528. And I do have some ideas for that, but I'm actually going to leave that where it is for now and talk about that later on, because this will be a very sensible place to wrap up this campaign diary. The players are excited for the next one, and I'm excited for the next one too. I hope everybody's enjoyed, anyone who's watched this has enjoyed it. If there's anything that anybody would like to ask about these sessions, or like how I run these fiends, or things they want me to extrapolate on, do ask me in the comments below, and I will answer them as soon as I can. I'm often very quick and prompt with these sorts of things. But yeah, so check out the various things in the description below. Follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram. Join the Lore by Night Discord server. And again, if you purchase the various books with those links in the description below, I get some of the money back, so I'm able to do more lore dives and character creation things and all that lovely, juicy, spicy stuff that I know that you all like me doing so very much. Until next time, farewell.